John McMullen's going to chime in. We talked a little bit about this yesterday with him. It was his article that kind of started the conversation, and then today there was a lot of the ratings came out, and things kind of caught my eye from John's article about is Colin Kaepernick. John writes this at todayspigskin.com. Is Colin Kaepernick hurting the NFL's television ratings? And we discussed it yesterday kind of in passing, but John, the ratings are out. Down everywhere. Sunday night football down. Thursday night football down. Monday night football down significantly. The Sunday afternoon games are down. So we asked a poll question about why. And what we're learning today is there is a large lexicon of reasons stemming from anthem protests, from bad product, from football fatigue, from the election going on, to we've got people who are turned off by the advertising, not the ads themselves, the content, the Cialis and the Viagra. You can't have their kids watching that, so they change the channel and never come back. But to me, Pete, and you might have heard it differently today, and John, what I'm getting is the officials and the officiating of this game, John, is biting this league in the rear end right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about that for a number of years, dating back. I thought at one point some people were going to wake up one day and say, you know what, this product isn't what it used to be. It's not nearly as entertaining. I always thought it was going to happen. It seems maybe it's finally coming to that point. And part of it has to do with, I always talk about the over-legislation in the game. Part of that is necessary from a legal standpoint because of the safety issues and all the encumbrances in court the league is caught up with. So you have that aspect. So it's a lot of things. As I said yesterday, it's a perfect storm from everything. And you mentioned the anthem protest. You mentioned that's the first time I heard Cialis or Viagra ads, but I'll throw that in there too.
Well, one of the things I do want to add to that, John, I want to add to that because one of the things that I said was, and I don't know if this is accurate, this is just an opinion, I think the generation behind me, I'm almost 40, I think the generation behind me just isn't a hardcore sports, they're a different sports fan than we are, than we were growing up. I don't think they're as into their teams. I don't think they live and die with their teams as much, and I don't think that they care as much. They're a fantasy football generation. We played fantasy football, but our teams always came first. I think for this younger generation, fantasy football comes before their team winning and losing.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, it's become a billion-dollar industry. I'm not a big fantasy player, so I can't speak distinctly on whether they're fans of their fantasy teams or actual teams like we are back in the day, and everyone seemed to grow up. But I think the bigger problem with millennials is the fact that they don't watch television like older generations, and they'll go to streaming options, and they'll go to YouTube, and they'll watch highlights, and they'll watch things on their tablet instead of a television set, and that affects ratings. So I think that, from that standpoint, I think that's the bigger issue with millennials. And by the way, the NFL is not the only one struggling there. The NFL is the last one. The NFL was, if you look at television ratings as a whole, they went into the tank years ago for everybody, except the NFL. It was the one thing that was always regarded as so-called DVR proof and streaming proof. And now it's becoming clear that it's not. It's going to take the same hits everybody else is. It just took a little bit longer. And we're in a new landscape. Nobody's been able to figure it out. Brighter minds than Roger Goodell haven't been able to figure it out. So for a league that's not exactly known for its proactive thinking, I think this is going to be a difficult hurdle for them because the ratings are going to continue to go down as the options increase. And the end game to that is what fuels the NFL's economy is advertisers. And if advertisers can't get eyeballs looking at their particular products, they're not going to pay as much as they're paying now. That's That's where we're headed. And
Right.
the NFL knows it, but it's one thing to know it, and it's another to try to figure out how to deal with it.
Okay. If I was to say, John, and this isn't known or scientific, our poll, that very unscientific, that is suggesting bad product. That's what's leading the poll right now. The poll question we asked, why are you not watching football? We gave 4 choices. Bad product, number 1. Anthem protests, number 2. Football fatigue, number 3. And the election, number 4, because there's a Sports Business Journal article suggesting that the presidential election is why the football numbers are down. But if I was to take out the other 3 and just say bad product, which is officiating, the injuries are causing poor play, what can the NFL do about poor product? What can they do about bad product?
Again, it's tough. I mean, one of the reasons you have the bad product, we talked about the officiating. The officiating to me, it all stems from the safety issue because they've over-legislated the game for safety precautions, and that's because of court cases. And that's just the reality. That's not going to change because there's too much money on the line, and if they go back to the way it was, they'll be liable for paying out hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're just not going to go in that direction. So from that standpoint, it's very, very difficult. But one way you can improve the product is during the next CBA, because obviously you can't do it in this CBA, up the practice time, because I think that's the biggest problem. And I think coaches around the league talk about it. When you compare this system to the previous system as far as preparation time, as far as scheduled practices, it is dramatically different. And I think you can point to the beginning of that CBA in 2011 as when there was a nosedive in the product as a whole, and that's because the practice has been scaled back so much. It's not going to be as good. And the problem with that is players are never going to give up that win because they enjoy their off time. They don't want 2-a-days in the 100-degree heat in August. But you know what? It made them better football players. But, hey, they're not going to give it up. So I'm not sure you can change it. The toothpaste is out of the tube from that standpoint. And I think you're going to continue to see teams that aren't nearly as polished, and I think it has a direct correlation to the fact that the coaches don't get enough time to practice with them.
And then, John, today the news comes out that the Falcons are going to lose 3 OTA practice sessions next year because of violating league rules this past May. That's right, exactly to your point.
Yeah, and they could care less because I can tell you nobody thinks those things are valuable. The OTAs, because there's no pads on. Jim Schwartz will say it flat out. You can't tell anything until somebody puts the pads on. And that's why you see Pete Carroll in Seattle. He got in trouble for doing that twice, putting pads on guys, having contact. John Harbaugh got in trouble in Baltimore for putting them on this offseason. And these are veteran coaches. They know the rules. But to them, getting a chance to see these guys in a more competitive environment means more than losing 3 days of nothing. That's what they consider it as. Because, hey, a bunch of guys running around in shorts, other than from a schematic standpoint and installing certain things and philosophies and schemes, it tells you nothing about the player. Because you can't gauge anything until they have the pads on.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, and, of course, his article at todayspigskin.com. Check that out. He asked the question, is Colin Kaepernick hurting NFL's television ratings? And I think it's a big mix. As we're having this discussion, John, text messages are coming in. My vote, this is from Kara, said, bad product due to over-officiating, Hollywoodness of it all. The game is dangerous. This is another one. The game is dangerous and people are not playing, hence they're not watching. Other people are just saying, look, the game, the product. A lot of today, I'm learning, is the officiating and the bad product is stealing a lot of people's reasoning as to why. The Kaepernick stuff, I think, is in there. I don't think there's any doubt. But also, because, John, the Thursday night game has never been a good game. It's not like they used to give you good matchups. It has always been like the worst game on the schedule goes to Thursday night. So I can't say that the bad matchups are affecting it, right? I mean, that's not what it is.
No, and part of it, I mean, if you think about tonight, Arizona was supposed to be a good team, but all of a sudden Carson Palmer's hurt. It's going to be Drew Stanton against Blaine Gabbert on Thursday Night Football. I can almost guarantee you this is going to be one ugly football game again. And, yeah, so the entertainment – and I get the over-officiating because I can't stand it. And part of that is you.
But how about football? How about football fatigue? Too much.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a breaking point as far as saturation goes, and too much of something can really affect people's enjoyment of it. I mean, we're both wrestling guys. There's too much wrestling on TV. It's the same thing that's happened to their ratings. So sometimes less is more from that standpoint. But, hey, if somebody's willing to pay you hundreds of millions of dollars for your product, you're not going to say no. So that's why the NFL created the Thursday window. I wish it would go away, but it's not. As long as people are willing to pay for it, it's not going to go away. So,
real quick, John, does the Red Zone have ratings? Does anybody know what those ratings are for Red Zone?
No, but as a whole, the NFL Network has been a very, very disappointing aspect of the NFL's business. It hasn't really taken off to the point they thought it would. But, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of fantasy football people that'll just watch the Red Zone channel to see the touchdowns, and they're not watching actual games. And I don't know if the NFL cares about that as much because it certainly didn't affect ratings before this season. So I don't think that's a big cause of the downtick. I think you mentioned most of the major things. And by the way, don't downplay the presidential election because the fact that was the first debate was a Monday window during the Monday Night Football game. The second one's going to be this Sunday, which is another NFL window. So when you look at percentages and say Monday Night Football's down 19%, which is 1 in 5 viewers, which sounds horrible, but if you take out that one presidential election, it's down more like 7 or 8%. So it's not nearly as bad. So that is a big part of it, the fact that the election and the debates have fallen in the NFL windows.
All right, John McMullen, thanks, of course, again, bringing this topic to light. Good article at todayspigskin.com, and we'll get all the Eagles news and stuff from John tomorrow on the show. We'll get John's pick. Make sure you check out 97.3 ESPN.com. 5 on the Lions is up right now with John's pick for this week's game. We'll dive into that one a little deeper tomorrow. Thanks, John.
Hey, thank you, guys.